Welcome back to this afternoon's session about the Autodesk Construction Cloud, where myself and Robin will be taking you through some of the good work that we've been doing with some of our customers over recent times. It's an interesting session, this one, because actually earlier this year, I alluded to in the keynote session, we actually ran this session as well as some of the bits that Richard was doing around the certification. Now, it wasn't what he spoke about this morning, but we're actually going to do a rerun in terms of some of the content that we talked about in Milton Keynes back in February, where we looked at some of our customers or the Autodesk Construction Cloud and what their scenario was in terms of where they were, what the solution we offered them, and ultimately what the outcome was. So Rob and I are going to be jumping across across the room to actually talk to you and discuss this in a bit more detail. So it's going to be quite fluid in terms of being able to take you through and show you some examples with some videos as well in terms of what we've been doing. So it's quite an interesting one. Make sure you're asking questions in the chat box. We're going to switch to a short video. I'll be back in a second.
BIM helped us a lot. If you talk in terms of economy, it saves a lot of time and money for everybody. So it becomes sustainable by nature.
We have a lot of influx of population which is coming into Delhi and working. We just recently crossed the 7.1 million mark, and we have done a good job. I think we are very sustainable because railways has captured 30% of the market for transportation. We not only reduce vehicular congestion, but we are transporting masses from one point to another, and that is something I think which is beneficial to the city.
We have completed our phase 1, 2 and 3 well ahead of schedule, despite being in such a difficult urban landscape.
Phase 4 is our Delhi Metro project, where we are extending our arms and connecting it to a circular ring network in Delhi, so that people who are at the south can easily reach the north.
We are the first in the country who have implemented BIM 360 in totality.
We did approach our consultant what software or what common data environment that they use. And majority of the consultant came up with that they use Revit. They use Autodesk 360 for it. What we saw was that BIM is a good tool to do the construction as well as to translate into 4D, 5D monitoring, and then further into the asset management. Then it will become easier to maintain the entire ecosystem that we have.
We are more collaborative, we are cross-country, we are actually able to reach out to consultants who are not necessarily within the country, and we are able to collaborate and make it more sustainable.
That's why we have implemented BIM through BIM 660 of Autodesk, So bringing everybody together in a single platform was a huge success for us. We could have everybody commenting on the same conceptual model that we have at the beginning of the project. So we all knew what exactly we had to do.
I would say at present, Delhi Metro is poised to become one of the largest systems in the world other than Chinese metro. Because after phase 4, we would be 500 plus the kilometer length.
We have to design everything in BIM. I believe that should be the primary mandate because it defines everything, and we start to design and plan and do all our basic calculation and design through BIM. So that if we are again, revamping it down the lines, maybe 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, or 100 years, we know what exactly we built and what again we have to build on it. And so a preparation of BIM model or a digital twin now is very essential for any of the projects.
So it's really interesting to see in terms of that video just there, looking at how the organisation or Delhi Metro actually implemented Autodesk Construction Cloud. I know that with some of the terminology or videos that we used, it actually referenced BIM 360. But actually moving on in terms of them using the more up-to-date products, you can start to see that there. So I think it's really interesting. Some key challenges were shown there in terms of the stresses, the strains, the pressures that have been placed on that organisation to deliver. And I think if you caught the start of it, I know we had to start and restart, but in terms of what they were talking about, just the footfall and the sheer volume of people, getting quite a lot of organisations that we work with that are under similar pressures in terms of having to actually expand or operate or make sure that their building or facility is fit for purpose. And I think it's really interesting when we start to look at the challenges that the industry face. And as I said, in terms of what we spoke about or what we've just watched, we've talked about time and time again with our customers. And it's really interesting to see in terms of some of the challenges that your organisations are facing, whether that's in terms of looking at the margins that you make on projects. They're very tight. If issues arise or if you're unable to be as efficient as possible, then ultimately all you're doing is eating into time spent on projects, potentially missing deadlines, which then equates to actually having to have penalties or whatever it may be. And ultimately your working is so tight as it is. So actually being able to manage information or being able to work in a more efficient way is really important. I think what we're going to talk about really leads into that nicely. Talked about schedules again, so some of the projects that are going on, I think it's quite obvious in terms of actually maybe where you are if you think of a high profile project or what we classify as a mega project. I know from HS2 for instance and what's happened over the years gone by with that, but delay after delay after delay after delay, and ultimately it comes down to how people are actually communicating and how they're actually being able to manage their project, what site they have, what how they're able to oversee that. And another situation, and I suppose another challenge I just want to pick out is that of siloed information. I mentioned it earlier in the keynote, and ultimately when we speak to organisations, we ask them how they manage information, and they'll say through a whole range of different ways. So we use potentially SharePoint, or we've got a server, or we're using a common data environment that we've had for many years. It's like, okay, well how much information is actually going into that area? And one thing that was quite I found quite fascinating is a customer that we're talking to currently, and we've just implemented Autodesk Construction Cloud for them. And I'm not coming on to one of the scenarios that we're speaking about later in this session, but they were actually asked in terms of how much information they have. I believe it was in the region of about 10 terabytes. We did some analysis on them, or there was another organisation that worked with us and them to actually uncover that they didn't. Their project information equated to 40 terabytes. 75% of their information was being stored either locally on machines or in areas which they didn't want it to be, and ultimately we wonder why we have delays and we have problems when it means that we're not working from the latest file or vision or model. And that's really interesting to hear, because I think that how often does it take, or how much time does it take you to find information as it is, whether it's just being saved as under another name or a different file naming convention, whatever it may be. You can often spend a lot of time trying to find information. And I think that's really important, that you start to centralize and bring everything together and have one uniform way of working. And it's certainly a challenge. I mean, 95% of data going unused or being unused is really, really damning. So being able to actually see what you've got, but then also utilize it in the best way. So there was another one, labour shortage. So the animation didn't come up in time, but labour shortage is a key one in terms of finding the right people with the right skill sets. But if we move on in terms of actually thinking about it from an information management point of view, so building information management, BIM. I know we're moving away from that term. Rich is probably, although he's been into this session, or he's been into the virtual summit earlier today, he'll probably wince when I say that term, because we're moving away from the term building information modelling. We're now moving into this new understanding of information management. So dropping BIM and using it as information management. And that doesn't matter in terms of what role you play within your organisation. Everyone is an information manager, whether it's a document controller or back office, as you can see from the points beside me, design teams, project managers, construction directors, site teams, commercial teams, and even the owner and the operator and the client. They want to be in control of the information and be able to see that. So they are, by influence, actually managing information day to day and being able to see that, see the progress of their project, see it actually is going to be delivered on time. And they are getting a lot better educated in terms of understanding, in terms of how a construction project is managed in terms of new processes that come in, and with ISO 19650. So it's important to really to push that point home and just really make sure that you or customers, or when we speak to people, that everyone understands that you're all information managers. If you do it together and you work in the same way, it's very easy to find latest drawings, revisions, or being able to work up against tight deadlines. As I mentioned at the bottom, so you can see beside me, it's important for it's important for two things to be in place when managing information. Firstly, it's having the capability, so actually training people to use the technology or to the processes that you have in place. Now that might sound quite obvious, and I think that every organisation typically has that. It doesn't matter whether it comes around to information or whether it's actually just about how you should do things, the way you should model, the way that you should communicate, or whatever it may be. Being able to actually manage information in the right way often comes down to making sure that your team is capable and ready. And we're going to come on to a few things later on in this session that talks about that. The other one is the capacity, having the tools and actually the programs to be able to manage it in the right way. Ultimately, if you're working on the server-based, if you're using a folder structure on a server and it's being saved on the servers, can't get my words out there, but I did second time round, you are restricted by the amount of capacity you have. And for the video that we've just shown, you're going to be working with, or they'll be working with some quite big models, either through point clouds or some very large railways or railway models. There's going to be some big and very heavy civil files in there, and it's important that you actually have the capacity to be able to store them and make sure that revision after revision after revision is stored okay. So capability and capacity for me, probably the two most important things. It's making sure that your business is set up to succeed. So let's take a look at the Autodesk Construction Cloud then and how it actually fits in. We'll come into this in a bit more detail, but to give you an understanding in terms of what is available from Autodesk under their Construction Cloud banner, we have a few different areas. So you'll see at the bottom, Autodesk Docs is the document management system. So if you've used that before, or if you're new to it at all, it is the underpinning of all of the different programs, hence all of the little lines that connect with BIM Collaborate, Takeoff and Build. It is the area where your central repository of information is, and it enables you to have a whole multitude of different things, from saving different projects in there and controlling all of your documents, through to versioning, and also being able to actually have some approval processes as well. So it works really nicely in terms of actually doing or actually being able to manage things as you typically do, but ultimately it digitizes that. Rather than printing out or working from paper-based workflows, you're able to save all of your information in one place, and you're able to invite people in or out, send links, and actually update people there. And it's a data management system, project management system, or even in some aspects has the capability to work as a central CDE as well. If we move into top left-hand corner, we've then got BIM Collaborate. There's two areas of this. You've got BIM Collaborate and BIM Collaborate Pro. If you haven't used BIM Collaborate before, BIM Collaborate is for non-design users, or I suppose people that aren't going to be accessing and using the software like Revit or Civils or AutoCAD. And BIM Collaborate Pro is for active design collaboration inside of those programs. So if you're a CAD user or a Revit user, it'll be Collaborate Pro to actually enable you to file share or work share effectively. Work share is probably the best way of describing that. But Collaborate is being able to actually manage the project without having to have access to CAD. And you get some really nice things in there as well. So if you look at the key functions or features inside of Collaborate, you've got clash detection. So typically what you'd associate with that in Navisworks, but it's done in the cloud. Being able to do design collaboration, as I mentioned to you earlier, especially inside of the programs like Revit or AutoCAD. And also you've got other things like issue management and other coordination elements there. So why is Collaborate really important? Well, I think what we often find is when you're working with other contractors or people on a project, typically files will change, but you have no way of being able to see actually what's changed or what's been amended on that project. having Collaborate, you'll be able to easily see in terms of, so from one revision to another, what's been added, what's been removed, what's been taken away. And that's worth its weight in gold, because it's almost a spell checker for you to be able to see in terms of what's available or what's been updated or amended. And you don't have to go through and check quite large files sometimes and being able to see bit by bit what's happened. It could be the smallest change from a structural engineer, which ultimately they may not have communicated, which then actually creates a clash in your model. Being able to see that real time is very, very powerful. And as I said earlier, you do not have to be a CAD user to be able to actually access and use that functionality. It's all built into the cloud platform. Moving on to the final two, so we've got Takeoff. Takeoff's quite an interesting one because we've really started to see an uptake from estimators and also working with people around like the procurement side and being able to draw the information out of the model, either in a 2D format, 3D or a 3D format, and being able to actually quantify with quite good confidence or quite high confidence in terms of actually what's in there. Remember, the information that you get out will only be as good as what you put in. So if the information's good in terms of all different contractors on the job, then when it comes to Takeoff and using this program, it's very, very easy. And this starts to enhance in terms of what you've been doing potentially with spreadsheets. So actually starting to digitize this and connect with the other different areas of the Construction Cloud. Finally, you have Autodesk Build. So with Autodesk Build, it really is a very popular tool. I think with the Construction Cloud as a whole, we've started to see it year on year, probably since about 2020, so last 4 years when COVID was really at its height. We've started to see Build really take giant steps forward from the old plan grid days. And you've got some really good functionality there as well. So being able to connect with people in the field, whether they're doing site surveys, whether they're actually going and doing installations, and they can do a whole range of different things. From checklists to forms to RFIs, quality management, project timelines, cost, you name it, it has a lot of functionality in there. And it's doing really well in terms of traditional common data environments. And as I said, in terms of what we're going to show you a little later, more and more organisations are moving to Autodesk Build because it has a lot of much more mature features within the actual program. That's a little bit, I suppose, almost a taster in terms of what Autodesk Construction Cloud can do. Now we're going to talk about some customers. So we've got 3 customers in mind. Rob and I are going to switch between. I know Rob's getting ready to come on, but I'm going to explain one customer which we've been working with for quite a while, and I will hand over to Rob. So I will set him up very nicely in terms of to describe to you in terms of what the customer is or what they've been doing, and ultimately then Rob and what his team have been achieving with them and working with them over the last few years. So let's have a look at the first one. So with the first customer, we have a very traditional and large MEP consultant, building services firm. When we started working with them near enough 4 or 5 years ago, they were very much traditional methods of construction and very traditional way of working. And I think it really came down to actually COVID had to happen for them to actually adopt the technology that was available to them. Unfortunately, it's often the way, isn't it? In terms of actually for something quite bad, it was horrendous in terms of what happened a few years ago with lockdowns and everything that ultimately happened from there. But for that to happen, for then organisations to actually try to transform and to look at their digital transformation strategies. Now, the benefit that this organisation had is that they were already using some of these products, but within one department in quite a large organisation that spreads across all of the UK and multiple different offices. So they already had some understanding of the capability that software offered. But what was really interesting to see is just the sheer scale of people that were unable to work if they didn't go into the office and were actually connecting for it, or being able to try and connect through VPN remotely would be painful. So it really started to help them at quite a difficult time. And this is an organisation that is growing and continues to grow, and especially over the COVID period, they had a lot of projects going on, which they ultimately needed to deliver. So let's take a look at a few of the points in terms of challenges they faced. So issues were not being communicated, and this was also quite prevalent in terms of the setup they had with Autodesk Construction Cloud at the time for on a much smaller scale. Latest versions and revisions were being missed. So ultimately, what this meant is they were actually working or have people on site or subcontractors working on site that were working to out-of-date models or versions and revisions from there. As I mentioned earlier, it was very much a case of it was server-based storage. So information was often on different drives. The VPN was slow. It really became quite painful. If any of you experienced that, especially over COVID, it is almost demoralizing in terms of being able to work from home but not being able to do your job. Ultimately, there's deadlines to meet, and if you can't get, or if it takes ages to be able to get and retrieve the data to be able to work on a model, or it's not syncing properly, days go by, hours go by, weeks go by, whatever it may be, and ultimately you're just losing time, and that deadline is just ticking. It's just coming along at a quite fast pace. Finally, the biggest point for them was actually security. So when they were sharing files or trying to share files internally as well as externally, they felt that security was quite a problem. They were often finding that some of the teams, because they didn't have Autodesk Construction Cloud set up, were using Dropbox, WeTransfer and other methods to share files. And this caused a huge problem because we work with the IT team, and when they started to hear and see, when we did a bit more of a scope and understanding of what they needed in terms of the onboarding side, they were horrified to understand in terms of actually some of the projects they were working on, that data was being shared in that way. If they had known before, or also from a cost point of view, if they had known before, I think this probably would have sped things up. So I've talked quite a bit about this customer, so I'm going to hand over to Robin. I won't click because I know he's going to show a video as well. But I'll let Robin explain in terms of actually what solution we offer this customer.
Okay. So this for me is clear reason as to why a lot of those points that we mentioned earlier, both myself when I went through the keynote session and talking about central source of truth and those 3 R's, and Rich when he went through his digital session and talked about the importance of that common data environment. These challenges here are, for me, the key ones that point to that central source of data and central source of truth being ever so important. So let's just take a quick look. While I'm talking, I've just got a bit of a video to play in the background, just so it's not too much death by PowerPoint. But clearly, finding data was a huge problem for this client, and finding the latest data or the up-to-date data. And with Autodesk Docs, the ability to search for the files that you have permissions to search for, be it on a file name linked to a standard, be it on show me the latest uploaded file, or the latest thing that Nathan's uploaded, or the latest thing that Richard's uploaded, whatever it might be. Be able to do that quickly and easily on a database-driven system is crucial, and that helped reduce the time it took them to find data. The ability to then look at that data and identify key changes between revisions to stop the need for having to manually review the model element by element, level by level. The ability to have the system there and then tell you, whether it's on a 2D drawing or on a 3D model, what's changed between those two key revisions. Why has the structural engineer issued another model to me? And seeing actually, therefore, what work do I need to do as a mechanical designer in this place to resolve any issues or work around some changes. That ultimately drove better collaboration. And with that better collaboration, naturally, you get better communication. And the tools that come within that common data environment to communicate things that are going on, again, whether it's in a 3D model or on a 2D drawing like the example on the screen, the ability to come in and add redline markup, whether that's personal markup just for you or published markup to the wider team, so long as you've got permissions to do so, to be able to control that communication as you see fit. So in general, what you're getting off the shelf, so to speak, is an ISO compliant common data environment that controls the names of your files and the permissions to those files. The ability to search those files quickly and easily, by their name or by any other metadata that's controlled next to the file. And then being able to use those files for greater, almost BIM use cases. So the ability to start pushing issue management. So start looking at some of these models and seeing what's going on in the models, logging them as an issue against the model or the drawing, communicating those issues, and even pushing those issues back to the likes of Navis or back to the likes of Revit, so that the designers internally as a mechanical equipment or an MEP company, or even externally to the wider project teams, so that they can see what's going on, what's being raised as a problem, and why is that an issue. If you link all of that together with the fact that it's cloud-based, and as Nath said, clearly during those early pandemic days, leveraging or trying to rely on VPN and network storage, it's so slow. And if any of you are out there still using Revit Server, the amount of time it saves using this technology, you're talking, 3, 4, 5 times faster to synchronize a model. And that's me being quite conservative. So the tools are really there. And for this company in particular, really managed to streamline their workflow and bring them into almost, modern times with regards to the data management and how that data management works. So I'm going to hand back to Nathan, who's just going to kind of bullet point those, make sure I haven't missed anything, and then we'll move on to the next example.
Thank you, Rob. And it's really interesting to see with this customer because, with where the Autodesk Construction Cloud's been, it was BIM 360 at those early stages. So we started to actually implement it and then move into much more the much more riches of the features that are available, but very much a simple but almost sophisticated setup. It just meant that they were able to adopt it and start to see massive improvements in terms of the way they were working. So let's have a look at some of the outcomes that we got from that. So you mentioned about issues, versioning, server-based storage, security issues, and also rework. Rob did a great job just explaining about a few of those bits. So what we implemented and what we've been working with the team on is actually the core element of Autodesk Construction Cloud, Autodesk Docs. We implemented a very simple data management data management solution to be able to help them in each of those areas, whether it's permissions and security, setting up permissions for different teams, different departments within those organizations, being able to only see what they need to, but also it starts to then tighten up on security. They're able to then also share a link, send it to a client, send it to a contractor, and ultimately they're then taken to that version. So it would always update that model when they're working off the latest area. So that started to de-risk their organization. All data and file types are saved in one place, as I mentioned, and you're able to work remotely effectively. And that was really big because I remember back, it would have been middle of 2020 when people were still going into the organisation, still going to the building just to be able to work because they were growing far too frustrated from working from home. So being able to work remotely and using and leveraging the cloud is really important. As I mentioned about latest versions, they're always being used. You had approval set up and also issues were clearly visible. So again, with what Rob showed on the viewer there. But what actually started to happen is one thing that we didn't necessarily plan for. It was more a case of just getting a team to be able to work and carry on. But what we started to see is this final point behind me. Management teams were able to understand their projects, their time frames and what was going on much more effectively. And for those non-CAD users, being able to use the viewer and bits which, or some of the features Rob showed, was really, really powerful. So yeah, Autodesk Docs, I think what we conclude is Autodesk Docs was implemented with the right training and upskilling, and ultimately was a great success in their business. And now it is very much a cornerstone in terms of the way they operate within their workflow. So let's move on to scenario 2. I remember when we presented this a few months ago, I put my hand up, I asked people to raise a hand if they're an F1 fan, and I know full well I can ask that question now and I have one stood beside me. So I know he's going to be very happy talking about the solution that we implemented for this customer. So this customer actually is quite a small organisation. I'm not going to go through all of the points that you can see on screen, but to give you a snapshot of what this business was doing, I was with them quite a few years ago when the Miami F1 Miami F1 race was actually announced. It was approved, and I was in the office that day, and they were so happy in terms of actually the work that they were doing. But they were more a design house in terms of they were being asked to manage the overall construction and bring people in. So this was very much a new area that they were going into. They had some of the skill sets, but ultimately they're a small organisation. So what they were trying to do is actually to to give off the impression that they were a bigger hitter than potentially what they were. And ultimately, they needed to have the processes and the software as well as the infrastructure in place to be able to do that. And some of the things that were really important to them is the fact that they're working on an international basis. They were working with people over in the US, but also there was other contractors that were based outside of the UK that they had to work with. So working to different time zones and being able to communicate with people is really important that they had a place to do that. They also had no model checking or clashing capabilities, which, again, when they were federating models, that started to worry them in terms of actually being able to understand whether they had done the right thing. So it was really important to them to be able to have a function which would be almost a fail-safe. They would be able to actually take all of the models, all the drawings, all of the data, put it into one place, but also understand and be able to validate that as well. So I'm going to hand back to Robin, and he can talk, and he's going to talk about what we actually did for this client.
Nice. So this particular client, before I start the video, I'm a huge petrol head, so the fact that they designed this F1 track is great for me, and fingers crossed for the Papaya McLaren this weekend in Monaco. But that aside, what's interesting is how tight to deadline this particular circuit was. So any fans like me of Formula One will know that it was almost weeks before the event over in Miami for the first time that everything was finished and ready to go, and there was a lot of question marks over it. And in my mind, clearly the functionality that enabled them to have better global communication and collaboration and what have you really aided in their ability to, in quite a small deadline or a short deadline, get this thing over the line. The other thing to point out is, whilst a lot of the examples that I'm going to be talking about through the video clearly going to be Revit based and in and around the different collaborative tools from that perspective, they designed the thing in Civil 3D. So a lot of their track design is done inside of AutoCAD Civil. And it's important to note that BIM Collaborate Pro as a product in the Construction Cloud, as well as being there to support your Revit cloud work sharing, also enables the more vertical AutoCAD products, namely Civil 3D and Plant 3D, to work in a cloud-based collaborative environment. And that's again why the BIM Collaborate products for this client were of extreme importance. So tight deadlines being the first thing. And what's key with regards to those tight deadlines is making sure that when you open a model, that it will grab the latest changes and both publish the latest changes as soon as they're made. Whether it's in Revit, whether it's in Civil, whether it's in Plant, or just plain old vanilla AutoCAD, making sure that you are pushing and pulling the latest data using BIM Collaborate Pro alongside the desktop connector is key. And that meant that they could finish a day's work over here in the UK, hit the sync buttons, hit the save buttons, and have confidence that when they pick up the work over stateside, everything's there and ready to work, and vice versa. Those people on the project that were using the likes of Revit to drive better coordination and communication could use the clashing tools inside of BIM Collaborate to be able to clash automatically on the cloud. And for anyone out there that's used Navisworks, this is a game changer, because it takes those very simple clashes, those ones that you have to go and create your clash groups for and go and ignore this one, do that one. You upload models into a collaboration space, the system clashes them for you automatically, and it starts giving you a report. You can then leverage that report into the issues, which you saw in visual in the first video a few moments ago, but you can also start pushing those into Navisworks to be able to run greater fidelity clashes or report on them in a bit more detail should you want to. So the ability there to really drive these cloud-based tools to enable better collaboration and communication as early as you can is really, really key. And again, these Collaborate tools in BIM Collaborate take some of the standard model viewing capabilities, such as the change visualization, so the comparison, and it allows you to go through that in the nth degree. One thing I really like inside of Collaborate, and Collaborate Pro, which I feel is very underused, is the swim lane functionality, which is what you can see behind me now. And what the swimming lanes allows you to do is set up all of the different individuals on that project and look at their work and start creating works packages and tracking those work packages throughout the project. We can then have visibility of those packages when they are coming up and when they go live. And we can work on those packages and download them to make sure that, okay, well, I want to do some work today, but there's going to be a new package is scheduled for tomorrow. So I'm going to wait for that to come. And off the back of that, we can start visualizing our entire project timeline and trying to get a better understanding of how it's working. So with those BIM Collaborate and BIM Collaborate Pro tools, which are all built, remember, off the baseline common data environment Autodesk Docs, you take the latest data, it automatically clashes it for you. You can synchronize that directly inside of Revit and work share inside of Revit live on the cloud. So there's no more need, as I said earlier, to use things like Revit Server, which nowadays it's quite slow. It's just how it is. Using your internet connection rather than VPNs, which steal your bandwidth, is much, much quicker to do this kind of work. Bring all of these together, they managed to deliver the circuit on time. The project was a huge success, and actually it was a fantastic race first time out as well. Last time out, yeah, it was okay. Wasn't quite as interesting as the first time out, but hey ho, they still have a car park that looks like a beach with boats. So for me, it's great. So yeah, I shall hand back over to Nathan, and we'll go through the next scenario.
Sure. I think it's interesting track, and I remember, like I say, when I was with the client at the time, this was many years ago, because I know it was ultimately a delay in terms of when they initially planned to actually get this race underway, and then actually when the first day arrived. I think it was last year, wasn't it? Yeah, it was last year. So very controversial in terms of actually, not many people do know that when the planning went through or where the race was going to be, they had to actually rethink that. So as you can see with the picture behind me, because it was based in quite a quite a built-up area in Miami, they ultimately actually moved it and changed actually where the locations were going to be. So a lot of changes, a lot of difficulty there, but ultimately, I know like Robin said, he enjoyed the race last year. So what did we land on then? Well, Robin's discussed in terms of spoken about the BIM Collaborate Pro aspects, BIM Collaborate Pro, so the extension of Autodesk Docs, which we spoke about with scenario 1. But what the main benefits were is actually a centralized model. So being able to have that, save an enormous amount of data, and then actually, from a result of that, and a huge amount of time in terms of being able to have that all in one place. So it really de-risked the project. It saved them a lot of stress in terms of typically how they manage the project, but ultimately they were able to spot issues much, much earlier. So a really interesting one. And I know that the team were, well, Robin in particular, very, very happy to work on it. So let's move to the final customer that we're going to be talking about this afternoon. And this organisation are, again, quite a traditional business. They're a very, very large organisation, been working for quite some time. And they do a whole range of different things, from whether it's a case of doing the designs, the builds, but also actually then they're starting to offer maintenance and FM capabilities in the water sector. So a large organisation that actually has some very high profile clients. They also had a very interesting set of organisations that were beneath them, because what actually started to happen is their supply chain actually was slowly but surely bought by that organisation. So rather than outsourcing work, they started to work and partner with organisations, and eventually, because of the successes they were having, they actually bought a lot of organisations. So this started to mean that they had a lot of people under the umbrella of the main group, but also there was a lot of people working in different ways. So this rapidly growing organisation often found that communication was the biggest problem for them, and that was working primarily internally, but it was a nightmare when it came to externally as well. Although they had a very good relationship with their clients, they felt they could improve that, and they actually felt that they start to influence in terms of what the client was starting to do. So from an owner-operator point of view, they were actually looking to them for, I suppose, a bit of experience or for a bit of knowledge and just their expertise to be able to help and guide them and support them. And the information management side, whilst on the I suppose on the top, kind of like the top layer, it looked as if it was very, very good. Actually, when you started to peel it back, there was a lot of inefficiencies there. And that's quite natural, because when you start to move across different entities or people working in different ways, and also the sheer volume of people, they're all working in different offices that are spread around the country. So trying to actually enable communication to be as good as it can be is often very, very difficult. So trying to centralise that communication and also that data side was really important for them. They also felt that reporting was very, very poor. So being able to actually use the information to see where the progress was of a project, or actually being able to work with a client in terms of to deliver it as it should be. They were doing a very good job, but they wanted to improve that because they have big growth aspirations. And as you start to take on more people and you grow and the projects get bigger, so does the risk. And they were quite keen to try and actually make sure that they were, as they grew and got much larger, they ultimately had the processes in place. So on that note, I'm going to hand back to Robin, which will be able to talk you through our third and final customer for this session.
Thanks once more, Nathan. So this client, actually very interesting, because they had a mixed environment with regards to their design software. So what they're making on the image there is a lot of prefabricated components. But when these are put together, it's kind of a building. They were doing a lot of that in Inventor using tube and pipe functionality, which is just astronomical when you think of the scale. So just as a side note, alongside what we're talking about here with regards to ACC, we also looked at their different workflows and advised that they use Inventor alongside Revit to enable the scale of what they were putting together with these prefabricated buildings, basically. Which saved them an obscene amount of time when it came to routing pipes and routing ducts and so on and so forth. But when it comes to looking at the Construction Cloud, the key here, as per Nathan's points, were really all down to better site-based coordination or site-based collaboration. So yes, you've got the underpinning Autodesk docs for that CDE, that central source of truth. Yes, you've got BIM Collaborate Pro and the wider coordination and collaboration pieces as per the last example there. But on top of those, you also have site-based workflow. And that's where Autodesk Build comes in from the Construction Cloud. Autodesk Build sits on the docs platform. It's still ACC. But what this does is it drives better coordination to the site, because it can pick up and publish sheets for the site teams to view. And when it's picking up those sheets for the site teams to view, it's extracting the data from the title blocks and the drawings, from the sheets themselves, and making sure that that information is put where it's needed, so that drawing numbers or titles or whatever it might be is up to date. It's basically got an OCR scanner in there to do it for you. So when they're looking at the data on site, it's up to date, the information's correct, and they're looking at the latest and greatest available version for them. No longer are they walking around site with incorrect versions. Because it's online and multi-device, they've also got the mobile app on their tablets, and they're able to view these directly on the mobile app. As well as just viewing data, they're also interacting with data digitally. So using Autodesk Build, we can create and collate a set of digital forms for pretty much whatever you're filling out information for currently on your projects. The example on the screen is a pretty generic COVID assessment, but that aside, it's filling out a form. And we can simply either upload PDF forms onto the system for it to use, or create forms from scratch on the ACC platform using the Form Builder tool. Either way, we have the ability to, either in a browser or on a handheld mobile device, fill out a form and submit it live into the platform there and then. You no longer have to fill it out on a clipboard, take it back to the office, scan it in, or get someone else to scan it in, upload it to the right place, so on and so forth. The information that you add is live as soon as you add it, so that the people that need it and have permissions to do so can see it. I'm a little bit behind the video here, but you've also got asset tracking. What these guys do is a lot of plant-based equipment, as you saw. I'm going to try and pause the video there, actually, so I don't get too far ahead of myself, and I can do that because we're live. So I'm just going to go back to that view that says assets and just pause it for a second. So with those assets, started it again by accident, with those assets. These guys did a lot of plant equipment. As I said, a lot of tubes, a lot of pipes, and a lot of componentry. A lot of that componentry will need services or service information or has its own document or specific instructions. And that's where the asset management comes in on something like Autodesk Build. Because we can tell Build about the project, about the site, about the rooms and the locations, and we can set assets up in the system and then link both 3D model geometry and 2D drawing geometry to those assets. So we can start visualizing our assets around the building and also tagging them with information such as a barcode so that we can scan it on site, which might then take us to ACC and show us a load of information with regards to service instructions or access instructions or whatever else it might be. A simple thing like how to find the shutoff valve for this particular component can be logged and stored on the system. It makes your life on site so much easier and a lot more streamlined. The other thing that we have alongside all of this is then the ability to use the data that's there. And that for me is huge. And inside of ACC, whether you're using Docs, whether you're using Collaborate or whether you're using Build, we can use the power of Power BI, excuse the pun, and we can use that to grab data from ACC and visualize it using Power BI. Power BI is a fantastic data visualization tool which brings your reports to life, and it gives you the ability inside your design review meetings or your collaboration meetings or your data drop meetings to visualize data in a very visual way that's live. We can start clicking on these pies or these tables or these filters and getting a live insight as to where are we on the project, what's going on, where are we with regards to construction, what's happening with the schedule, what about all these issues, what's outstanding, who do I need to chase and what do I need to do. Autodesk, as part of the data connector, provide an obscene amount of templates for you to use, first and foremost. A lot of the examples you can see on the screen are from those data connectors. But you can also use them to reverse engineer the Power BI visuals. As someone that uses Power BI for a raft of other things here at Man and Machine, this gives me the capability, and anyone else that knows Power BI the capability, to really understand how the reports are made and start customizing them to drive your own. Simply put, it's never been easier to use a collaborative tool like ACC and then drive that information that's stored within that tool to a useful set of reports. And one thing that I'm certainly trying to push here as an organization is how reports are great, but if we can drive those reports more actively and more visually, it's worth a lot more than, you know, a piece of paper report or a PDF report or a flat Excel report, which, okay, yeah, great, I've got some pivot tables, but there's a lot there to really bring that project to life, and traceability and auditability, especially in this digital world, are really, really key. And really, that's kind of all I wanted to share on those three examples. So I'm going to hand back to Nathan, and he's going to wrap us up.
Thank you very much, Rob. So it's really interesting to see, and I think that Robin's given a lot of detail behind the client that we're working with and ultimately what we achieved with them. So just to actually bring it back around then, so with this client in particular, we proposed a few different things for them, but the kind of the core elements were built around Autodesk Build and also then BIM Collaborate Pro. So being able to actually connect the field, as I spoke about earlier, and using the features for site layouts, or for not site layouts, for surveys, and also for to then actually help people in terms of fulfilling or working on site, and then also BIM Collaborate Pro from a design function as well. So I know whilst Rob's actually talked about in terms of quite a lot of the detail we gave or we helped them with, but some of the key things were just actually being delivered, and also being able to keep an eye or keep track of the actual reporting function as well. Rob's alluded to it in terms of actually being able to visualize things. I think that's so important. Otherwise, you could be looking at a mountain of information or paper, and it's not really actually being able to actually understand that properly. So there's quite a few things there that we've talked through. If any of those actually resonate with you, or you'd like to learn more, then feel free to get in touch with the team. But just to take you through in terms of what we've been doing and kind of summarise what we've spoken about, I think it's important to finish there. So we started this session by talking about information management goals. Now, they split into two different areas, both from the organisation, but also from the people as well. Everyone is an information manager, and at some point in terms of when working on a project, you will be handling information or being able to save it in a certain way, which ultimately you might need to go back to, or people will have to go to refer and be able to do their job. So if we do this actually in the right way, there are some very easy outcomes and benefits that you'll realise. I've listed a few on the screen behind me, but if you look at it from a business point of view, ultimately we're looking for an improvement in productivity. Now that sounds very vanilla, and I completely agree, but how often or how many times or how long does it take you to try and find a file or a revision or a drawing or whatever it may be, and you're pulling your hair out or tearing your hair out because you're ultimately working outside of work hours and you can't find that, and you can't contact the person to see what they've done and that you're working with, but you're spending so much time trying to find information. Now imagine how many times that happens, how many people that happens to, and ultimately what the benefit would bring by actually organising it properly. Ultimately, then this starts to have a knock-on effect in terms of how quickly and effective you're delivering projects, and ultimately the profitability of projects as well. If you can produce the project in less time, then ultimately it means that your costs are lower to actually fulfil that. From a people point of view, now this is just as important, if not more important. Enhancing the skill set and the ability of your team gives them a really good intrinsic feeling to actually feel like they're doing a good job. It improves retention, but it also creates that role fulfillment. I think that's really important in terms of actually how your business operates and the process you have in place to be able to make sure that the team are doing a good job. So all that said and done, where do you start? It does seem like quite a daunting prospect for any organisation that goes into this, when you have to start to think about how much data you have, the processes, what does a plan look like for me, which we'll come on to shortly. How do I get the people to do it? It's going to be a change. They don't like change. And ultimately, our current systems are, it's going to be really difficult to move over. Well, often you feel that's the case, but that's not necessarily the reality. So the way that man and machine approach it is in much more simplified approach, or sensible manner, I'd probably like to say. We would typically do, with any implementation, we start with a demonstration. So we would understand in terms of where you are at this moment in time, what you're trying to achieve, and ultimately what you're using. There's only so much you can do in terms of a demonstration. You're never going to be able to, with confidence, go, right, we're making this change as an organisation and we're moving into this programme. Because we don't necessarily understand you in terms of what's important to you and creating a plan. But secondly, you're not going to be able to actually understand the true benefit that program can give you, all of the features and functionality. So what we quickly do after we've done a demonstration and we've agreed this is the right way to move forward, is we typically do a workshop. Now this can be a day or a handful of days, and I spoke about this in the keynote session this morning. And we would sit with you, talk you through the program feature by feature, and actually give it a lot more detail. So really telling you in terms of how it works, and we can start to understand in terms of how you work. Together, we can then have how the feature works, and we show you and demonstrate to you how that works, but then also start to map out in terms of how your workflows are. You then have a plan. When we have that, we then actually go away and document it, and we summarize that in terms of a report. So we have a recommendations report that we typically send to customers. By the way, we're operating this way, not just for Autodesk Construction Cloud, but for all of the different programs and softwares that we implement that are new to any business. And to do that, we clearly define a roadmap, like you can see, that tells you in terms of how long it will take to get there, what your objectives are, and ultimately means that we meet your expectations. We then implement it. So as everyone will know, you're never going to just go, right, down tools and everything now, and we're just going to go into this way of working. That's never going to happen. You're always going to have a pilot project, or maybe a department or a team that's going to use this for the first time. We would implement this, understand in terms of actually how that's gone, and start to work with them over the next few weeks and months to make sure that the adoption's in place. When the adoption's in place, then we start to then actually look at lessons learned. And as I said, again, this morning, we can then understand in terms of maybe what you would have done differently. We have the experience to be able to support you and tell you that, but ultimately every organisation and business is different. So being able to understand how that pilot project went, or how that initial deployment went, we can then optimise it. So then we can understand in terms of actually what do you want to get from that. Whether that's some of the things or features that Robin was speaking about from a reporting point of view, that's not all going to happen necessarily straight away, but being able to actually start to make sure that you're getting the information or being able to work in that right way. So we optimise it, and then ultimately we can then take that either project-wide, company-wide, or wherever it may be. I mean, we've got one client at the moment where the ultimate aim is to actually take this globally. So once we've done that, ultimately we're finishing championing that. And what you then tend to have from that is an investment which you can hang your hat on, and you know that you're getting the most out of it. So that's our roadmap. We talked to you about the software, and I'm going to hand back to Robin, who's going to talk about our e-learning program, which we have launched earlier this year. Rob.
Thank you, Nathan. So last little bit from me today, and then you won't have to listen to my droning tones anymore. But I just want to talk to you once more about e-learning. Anyone that's been with us all day will have heard my section in the Virtual Summit keynote about this, both yesterday and this morning. But I want to make another point of talking about it now as part of this Construction Cloud session. And that's purely because of the amount of Construction Cloud content that we have on this platform. And anyone that comes to talk to us with regards to an ACC implementation, as Nathan said, A, will take them through those workflows and those workshops step by step before we implement them. But B, having this content there to then use and relate to and use for reference moving forward is really, really helpful for both their user base to drive internal champions and support, but also for their administrators should they need to make tweaks or adjustments to the configurations moving forward. I'm not going to talk through each of those again right now, because again, we've got a lot of content on there. If you've joined us this morning, you would have heard about all the individual sessions specifically, but I want to make one more point about the specific content. There's about 54 or 55 individual videos for the Autodesk Construction Cloud amongst the different modules. Those modules are text, video, interaction, and image-based learning content that are backed up with knowledge checks and course challenges to really make sure that someone's learning, whether they learn by listening, by watching, by doing, or by reading. There's an option there for them, and the content supports that. Alongside that, it's a named user, one fee for a yearly subscription, a little bit like your favorite streaming service, whether it's Netflix or Amazon or Disney or whatever it might be. But this is for high quality, best in class CAD and design software learning. So it's got AutoCAD, it's got Fusion, it's got Volt, it's got Revit, it's got Dynamo. You pay one price. Early adopter fee is £150 per user per year, and you get access to every single course. We don't charge extra for the BIM courses. We don't charge extra for the Dynamo courses. You pay one fixed subscription. Any content that is released throughout your subscription, you get access to. You don't have to pay any more. It's fairly new. We launched it in March. A huge amount of people using it already, but it's constantly evolving. And we're also listening to your feedback. If there's something that you want from an e-learning course, let us know and we'll make it happen. We're really, really proud of what we've achieved with this e-learning content, but specifically for the Autodesk Docs and Autodesk Build users out there, and soon to be Collaborate as well. It's got a lot of content in there that you should find extremely useful. Not quite sure why it's now playing a video, so I'm going to go back and stop on that slide, which I'm guessing is where I'm going to next. So that's all from me. I'm going to now hand over to Marcus, and Marcus has been doing some really great work with our clients and different organisations that we're working with regards to helping them transform their digital adoption with the Autodesk Construction Cloud. Whether that's a small firm or practice that wants to work with Autodesk Docs, or a multidisciplinary organisation that wants to work with the whole range of different products. Marcus is doing a great job helping onboard them, helping implement them, workshopping their requirements and getting them up to speed. So I'm going to hand over to Marcus, but from me, thank you ever so much for listening, and I'll let Marcus close us out. Marcus, over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Robin. Hopefully you all enjoyed the last session and going through the Autodesk Construction Cloud. I may be a new name to a lot of you. I'm the UK lead for the Autodesk Construction Cloud here at Man & Machine. I work very closely with architects, construction companies, design and manufacturing companies to adopt processes to, in reference to sort of digital transformation to ensure that they're on the right journey. Appreciate Nathan's alluded to a lot of the stuff in reference to the adoption, likewise as Robin, but it's important to have a plan, which is split into 3 parts, which we demonstrate the product, we also look at the document, and we also have an outline plan. You may see the table in front of you which outlines all the products within the Autodesk Construction Cloud. One that may be quite familiar to a lot of you is the AEC collection. So if you have an AEC collection license, you get access to Autodesk Docs, which is the underpin to the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So if you're interested in implementing a common data environment or a document management system, this is probably a good way to start if you have an AEC collection, and I'd love to help you. There is other products like Collaborate and Collaborate Pro. A lot of people get slightly confused with what does Collaborate do and what does Collaborate Pro do. The only difference between both of them is within Collaborate you do all your coordination, your issue tracking, your clash detection. Within Collaborate Pro you get the Revit work sharing, which used to be called Revit Server a little while ago, or if you ever used BIM 360 it was called BIM 360 Design. There is also some other features that I'm very interested on here, which predominantly I spend a lot of time with Tier 1 main contractors, your Tier 2 contractors as well as architects and multidisciplinary practices, looking at Autodesk Build, which looks at your project management, your cost management, your communication with the site teams as well. You may see some new names on here that you're not very familiar with. For example, Autodesk Tandem, which I'm really excited about when we move into the operational maintenance space. There's other stuff in here like Building Connected, which will soon become available. But within the Autodesk Construction Cloud solution, within the build side, you can also manage the cost within the project itself. In the next part, there's a video which is just going to show you a little bit of an overview on the Autodesk Construction Cloud, just to reiterate some of the points that we've gone through today, looking at some of the core functionalities and the core products like Autodesk Build, Collaborate, and other features.
One of the clearest sources of truth on construction projects is a model. Having access to the information within that model is critical for teams both in the office and on site in order to make timely decisions and minimize rework. With easy-to-use access to 3D models from a mobile device, teams can visually communicate changes to stakeholders, document any constructability or quality issues, and improve collaboration between cross-functional teams. With the Plan Grid Build mobile app, teams can view and navigate 3D models on-site to better understand design and installation context. From within the mobile app, select any isolated model or multi-trade model saved within the Files tool. This includes Revit, Navisworks, IFC files, DWG files, and others. These can be accessed from the cloud or downloaded directly to the device for use in the field. Any permissions set within the Files tool on a desktop are the same on a mobile device to ensure the right people have access to the models. Once the model is opened, users can easily navigate throughout the 3D model to better visualize design intent and find relevant installation information quickly. Orbit around the model by swiping a finger on the screen or use the joystick to move into the model. Expanding the minimap gives users a bird's-eye view. Dragging the viewer icon around the map will move the users to that location, making it easier to navigate larger models. Toggling on the gyroscope allows users to intuitively look at their surroundings within the model by lifting and moving their device, helping to translate the model into their surroundings on-site. Viewpoints are saved camera angles and locations within the model. Selecting a viewpoint brings the user to that location and looking in that specific direction. This helps users in the office to communicate visual information to users in the field. Users can create viewpoints in Navisworks. Navigate to the model location being worked on, select an object, and choose Properties from the tool pop-up. Models also store property data such as materials, constraints, dimensions, identity data, and more. This data can be essential for installation requirements and following design intent. By helping teams on-site and in the office to visualize their 3D data, BIM Workflows in the field keeps project teams up to date, enabling them to quickly respond to problems as they arise.
So that brings us to the end of the Autodesk Construction Cloud segment for today's virtual summit. We are a little bit behind on time or on the schedule, so we are going to take a short break. We will be back at 2:30 to cover Autodesk Water. It's quite an exciting part that we've been looking forward to, because we've actually have a special guest with Autodesk Nick Pryor coming in to join us and speak to everyone very shortly. I'll be back on to introduce it in 5 minutes, but if you want to go grab a drink or take a comfort break, we'll see you very shortly.